Hello, I'm Aubrey Shepherd, and today I've got some seed to share. Just show you this. This is Joe Pye weed, and Joe Pye weed's a wonderful native plant. This is what it's sort of purple, but right now it's brown because it's going to seed. These are pods from the common milkweed. Has huge leaves, lots of food for monarchs if they show up, and they're just now a few showing up northwest Arkansas. Let's proceed with the rest of our pictures. Okay, this is passion flower, and it's passion vine, and that's because it's like a cross. This is a milkweed species, the climbing milkweed, and see it's forming a pod. You can see it in my hand and recognize that it's a very tiny flower and a very tiny uh, pod. This is Jody Nimmo, who's an Omni member and involved with a bunch of things in northwest Arkansas. And she had some of that climbing milkweed in her yard, and she was touching it there and pointing it out. These guys are over at that's Don Bennett at right and Jason Millett at left, and there's one of them out there on the ground of the farm, the nature farm, natural farm, the wonderful tricycle farm. Here are photos from Pinnacle Wet Prairie, which is adjacent on the west side of World Peace Wetland Prairie. And you can see in the background there, way up the hill past the railroad, you can see those new apartments, the view. This is mist flower, and it's a late blooming thing. It's just started blooming. These are actually on World Peace Wetland Prairie. And this flower I can't identify. Last year somebody told me what it was when it bloomed late, but it's at World Peace Wetland Prairie in bloom right now. And many of the yellow tall things, this is also in bloom at World Peace Wetland Prairie. This is evening primrose, and they really bloom in the morning, and in the evening they get prim looking by closing up. That's on my car window. I was driving very slowly when I perceived that this thing was on there, so I made a couple of pictures. It's a little skipper, and that was at the corner of, stopped at the corner of 15th and School. That's a non-native plant, and Rose of Sharon, and it's got a little skipper on it, you see there in the middle. That's another good bush but not native. That's a skipper on Biden's, which is a flower that actually produces little seeds that you don't like on your clothing sometimes later in the fall. But it's a beautiful flower, and it's great for the wildlife. It feeds a lot of birds in the fall when it goes to seed, and you can see several different species of insects on it in this picture. That's not a bee, that's a flower fly, which does the same work of pollinating. There's a big old grasshopper, and it's also, I believe, on that Biden's, it's called, and you might know it as beggar's lice or beggar's ticks or something like that from growing up in the country maybe. And this is a view of Pinnacle Wet Prairie. There's a fellow walking his dog on a leash down there, and a patch of yellow flowers, and over in the background you see some looks like smoke in the air. That's dust from the parking lot of the Pinnacle Foods, who allows us to enjoy their beautiful prairie land. You saw basket flower, and now you're seeing goldenrod. Also, these are actually today's pictures. It's the 5th of September that we're recording this. There you see basket flowers. That's actually this morning on the 5th of September, and those are newly bloomed. And you can see one that's past bloom and going to seed there in the pod below it. But I made those in the light, but I did a trick by using my flash in close-up mode and made them. That's the same thing. I did that in the daylight, but using flash, so you can see that insect, and it's on I believe it's on the foliage of swamp milkweed. Maybe we'll get to see some of those in a little while. But that tiny flower there is also a passion flower. And you can see the foliage is different and the flower is tiny and sort of yellow. Till next time, this is Aubrey Shepherd asking you to do your part to help keep the water clean, the air pure, and the woods green. See ya. Hello, I'm Aubrey Shepherd, and it's the 5th of September 2013. Let's go straight to some photos from Fayetteville, Arkansas. That's the regional park. They're getting serious now because they've got a bond issue passed, but they really disappointed me by mowing the gigantic wildflower area there in the relatively flat part of it. This is, they made hay, sold it, I guess, and there's a swamp milkweed, and you see how at different stages as it's coming into bloom, it's just totally different looking on there. And the neat thing with all the milkweed plants is you'll see 3 stages all at the same time. This is a dayflower, and I don't know whether it's the native version or not, but there are both native and non-native versions. This is the Illinois River, and it tells you why we need rain, because there's no real flow in many parts of it, just like all the other streams around northwest Arkansas. In the middle there, you've got I can't name everything as we go. Here's some thistle, and this is a native thistle, and you see the very swallowtail butterflies using it, and that's a clear-wing moth on same batch of thistle, I think, same area of thistle. There's a white thistle in there. That's out near the Illinois River, and that's pretty unusual. And I thought, well, it's just faded, but no, it's actually just a variant in the group of thistles, and those are all native. This is the only monarch butterfly I've gotten close to this year, except at the Botanical Garden, and it's using that same tiny milkweed that we often talked about, the climbing milkweed. And you can see that it is a female, and it probably wanted to lay eggs, and it may have had to wait hoping that a male would come along and fertilize those eggs so she could lay them. I might be wrong. Maybe that deed was already done and she was actually in the process of laying them. I got as close as I could without disturbing her very much, but you can see the little yellow things. Those are aphid type things that damage the milkweed plants. Okay, there's that tiny Passiflora lutens, I believe it is, the small thing. There's Mary Jordan on Martin Luther King Jr. Anniversary of his speech many years ago, and Lionel, of course, declared it a day in his honor, and had speakers, and he spoke, and others there. This code sign is pretty funny because somebody, probably the owner, wrote, "City planted this Johnson grass here." So he's saying the city should come mow it, and he may be right. I don't know why he would do that, why the city would plant Johnson grass. It's so much right to get rid of. This is a 1977 column by Joe Mosley at the top of the page, and right under it's one of mine. And you know what I was talking about in that column? Habitat importance, just like I'm doing today in many ways. And that's one of the prairie wildflowers. That's at Pinnacle Wet Prairie again, just adjacent to World Peace Wetland Prairie. You can see the factory in the back. And that's called sneezeweed, although I never sneeze around it. And I guess when it, I don't know, there's a sneezeweed, and it looks just like a bitterweed flower, but the foliage is different. Anyhow, there's 2 kinds of big prairie grass. That one is Indian grass, the big yellow in the middle, and then those slender stems, that's big blue stem grass. And those are valuable native grass species. This is a boneset plant in bloom with a tiny butterfly on it. And I think it's called a banded hair streak. You can see the bands of orange on it. Well, there's a mist flower again, but it's a different one. It's at World Peace Wetland Prairie, but it's over in the edge of the bushes. This is the seed of the giant ragweed, or the flower at the end of the thing. Also, I hope somebody gives some attention to Randy Parrish garage, where the city's trail team has marked it off like they're going to take about 40 feet of his parking lot to run a trail to the street and then across there. And of course, back part of his property, if they do this, the trail will take out some of his trees in the back, quite a lot of down next to, in the riparian zone of the Tanglewood branch. That's on South School. See ya.